I'm Nathan Ponchard, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the Chery Omoda E5, the electric version of a Chery Omoda 5. Now, you may suspect that the E5 is just a nice car with a battery shoved in it, but it's not. The petrol version and the electric version of this were designed at the same time, and even though this didn't come out in Australia straight away, the floor of this car is fully a battery, which means low center of gravity and a holistic approach, giving us a frunk in the front, although it is only 19 litres, a charging port in the front middle, which is actually quite clever because you can charge it from either side, and a proper boot that isn't impacted by having the battery in there. It has a spare wheel in there instead, a full-size one for Australia, as we shall see. The rest of the car has had quite a few changes. The front has gotten rid of that oversized, silly grille that the petrol car has, most of which isn't a grille, it's just a pattern, whereas here it's unashamedly grille-less, and I think it looks better. It has its own 18-inch alloy wheels. They're sort of similar width, but a little bit higher profile, new design. It has multi-link independent rear suspension, which is with a front-wheel drive application here. So as you can see from where you are probably, unlike the petrol car that has a very narrow rear track and this sort of muffin top where the body hangs out over the back wheels, the electric version actually has grown into itself and sits a bit nicer.
Chasing Cars, honest reviews of your next car.
Brought to you by
Budget Direct.
Now this is the base BX. It is $42,990 before on-road costs. The E5 EX is $45,990 before on-road costs and has a little bit more equipment, but this car has cloth seats and I think I prefer this one better. It is minty fresh in this version here. It's called Titan Green. There's only 5 colours. The only other real colour is Martian Red, and this green and the white can both be had with a black roof, but here we just have the regular Omoda E5, no sunroof, standard spec, and I really think that's probably all that you need. As for some of the E5's EV stats, it has a 61.1 kilowatt hour usable battery, 150 kilowatts, 340 newton meters, a WLTP range of 430 kilometers. As we shall discover when we drive it, it has plenty of power, especially for a front wheel drive. Inside the E5, this is not just an electric version of the normal Omoda 5, it has its own interior. The dashboard does look quite similar, but it does have these full curved 12.3-inch screens. In the normal car, they're flat, and that blends into the dash, but this has a scalloped section here. This is all different. This is all different. No more transmission selector. That's now on the steering column. We've got a tray underneath here, which is really cool. There's a wireless charging pad just there. There's OK door storage. The seats are really good. In this base BX, it only has manual height adjustment, but I feel like the cloth trim and the general adjustment of the seat is fine. It doesn't need the electric of the upper spec model, in my opinion, which has synthetic leather. This does not have any synthetic leather on the steering wheel, it's just plastic, but honestly, it's probably more hard wearing. It feels fine, and I think it works pretty good. As does too the 6-speaker Sony stereo in this car. It has 2 tweeters less than the top spec EX, and the difference in price between the two for $3,000 is basically the electric seats, heated steering wheel, front heated seats, heated outboard rear seats, rear privacy glass, electric sunroof, and the Sony stereo that I mentioned with the extra tweeters, among a handful of tiny things, which is actually quite a lot for $3,000 more, but you don't really need to go there. In terms of the functionality in here, the stuff that is actually around me works well, but this screen here has many, many layers, and I will just refer to one of them, which is kind of important when you're driving the car, and that is when you are looking for where the regenerative braking would be. It is not in driver assistance, it is not in vehicle comfort, it is not in smart key, it is not in vehicle settings. You have to go back to home and hit the distance to empty, and then go other settings from the distance to empty where it has the energy recovery level, low, medium and high. And that kind of is emblematic of a lot of these systems in these cars where they are needlessly complex, and I get that once you know they're all there, they're fine, but again, nice screens, pretty nice to look at, but too over complex. And in this E5 here, I'm just trying to make it go to another screen, and it keeps selecting the ventilation, which it does quite a lot. In these screens, when you go to the vehicle settings and you go to all the safety stuff, it's just a whole bunch of screens that are all got little car schematics, all drawn in grey with little red bits, all exactly the same. There's no visual hierarchy, and there's a lot to read, a lot of little bits of writing. So again, I don't think that's entirely perfect for the vehicle safety, but whatever. As for the seating in the car, The back seat doesn't have a whole lot of under thigh support. It does have a fully flat floor. It has one USB-A and one USB-C in this car here, and 2 blanks where the seating and heating would be in the top spec. The door storage is kind of the same at the front, only up to about a 1 litre bottle. But I think one of the unexpected great things about the E5 is that it has a 300 litre boot with a full size spare underneath the back floor. And when you drop the backrest, it also has a pretty much fully flat floor. So because it is designed to be an EV from the beginning, it actually has that functionality built into the design. It isn't impacting on the way that it operates. Now, the Emoda 5 has been on sale in Australia for around 18 months now, and the electric E5 version definitely takes it to a higher level in terms of dynamics. It has the different rear suspension, as I pointed out. It definitely feels a little bit more polished on the road. The ride is a little bit more sophisticated. It certainly seems to be getting better over time. The ADAS, the advanced driver assistance systems, have definitely been massaged into place to be less obtrusive and more subtle. Though they are not perfect, we did have lane keep assist turned off, and the Emoda E5 did still try to add some lane assisting despite the fact that it wasn't turned on, not particularly subtly either. The driver attention monitor, which is the bane of many people's existence in some of these modern, highly featured vehicles of late, has managed to be toned down for the most part, though it did throw in a few false negatives, I'll call them, where it said, pay attention to the road when I'm doing this with hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead. So not entirely fixed, but definitely better than before. The calibration that needs to be done to the E5 though is really around the throttle tuning, the steering, and the regenerative braking. Now, as long as you've got everything turned down as low as possible, meaning regenerative braking on low, eco mode, dull the throttle as much as you possibly can if that's what it is in an electric car, and that sort of stuff, even having the steering and comfort, although sport is still fine, the E5 is relatively unobtrusive. It's sort of numbed into submission. But once those things start to amp themselves up, the sensitivity of the accelerator is just too much. It makes driving smoothly very difficult. And if you have the regenerative braking in medium or high, when you're cruising at sort of relatively low speeds on a very light amount of accelerator, it'll sort of surge and be nothing like you're in a taxi with an 805-year-old man driving. It's not polished and it is annoying. I don't know how anyone hasn't noticed that in it previously, but have it in low and it's fine, but have it in any of the other modes and it makes it very difficult to drive the E5 smoothly. Now, the other issue is the steering. It's light, it's electric obviously, it's really quite sharp. Like you can see here, the car's swerving a bit, even just turning it little bits like that, but it has this sort of stickiness in the steering and it gets to a point where it doesn't have any progression, and I think that's the issue with this. There is no progression in the way that it does these things. It's either on or off. It doesn't have the smoothness, and even the steering, like it gets to a point it just doesn't turn in smoothly. It's there and it's very sharp, and it's also very light, and then the more that you turn it in, I feel like it doesn't quite blend with the chassis of the car. It is not a huge issue, but in terms of it being polished and what it is, it's just not quite there. Now, we've been through the screen and the control systems and the difficulty with that, but you do discover where stuff is eventually and you know how to work around it. The range of this E5 is a claimed 430 WLTP, but based on our driving, which hasn't been, super economical, but we're testing a car, works out at between 328 and 347 real world kilometerage compared to the 430, and that's okay. It's not amazing. And the charge time too, they're only quoting 30 to 80%, so 30 minutes from 30 to 80%, but everyone else quotes 10, so I don't really know what that would be, but I would guess somewhere 35, 40 minutes perhaps, which is quite a long time. The other issue with the steering is that it actually does torque steer quite a bit when you're asking for all of the performance in the E5. Now if I flatten it, it's tugging away almost like it has lane assist in the steering, but it's not, it's torque steer. Sometimes it will even brake traction a little bit and chirp the front tyres, because it does have 150 kilowatts and 340 Newton meters. Its punch is really quite impressive and considerable, but these roads have all been dry, so I don't know what it would be like on a wet road. I suggest perhaps a little bit messy. As for the rest of the car, we've been through the interior, but it is definitely a step up. The driving position's pretty good in this electric seat model. We're in the EX, the top spec. It's got lane departure warning to make up for the fact that you can't really see a whole lot over your shoulders, because that rising belt line does make the back end quite closed in. But this in front of me is nice and expansive, nice locale. For the most part, apart from some wind noise around some of the windows here, we've got a bit of wind outside, and from the tyre noise from these tyres on course surfaces, the refinement is pretty good. Not amazing, but not terrible. But we are talking about an EV here that starts at 43 grand and goes to 46 grand before on-road costs, with pretty much everything. And so much like the regular Omoda 5, which is all about its on-paper value for money, the EV definitely continues that story and is a better car overall. In the 18 months that the Chery Omoda 5 has been on sale in Australia, it has actually come quite a long way. It's had a lot of adjustments to its adaptive safety systems, and this E5 I think takes it to another level again. It's a better car than its petrol sibling. It's better looking. I think the interior is more holistic. Its dynamics are better, and it's not perfect, admittedly. Like it needs the steering fixed. It needs some of the other calibration done. It needs quite a lot of calibration done with some of those safety things. However, in terms of the room that it offers, the style that it offers, the reasonable range that it offers, and for the price, which is going to be sort of under 50 grand drive away for this entry-level BX, there's actually quite a lot of car here. And Chery says it's a small SUV, but it's not really that small. It's more than 4,400 millimeters long. It's more than 1,800 millimeters wide. So you actually are getting quite a lot of car with a pretty decent warranty and tangibly respectable equipment. Even like the stereo and the way the things operate, it's a little bit slicker than what you would expect from Chery. And so this is definitely a step in the right direction. And this minty fresh BX here, while it is not the greatest EV in the world, it's actually not too bad either. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you haven't subscribed, please do so below the video. Hit the notification bell and tell us what you think about chasing cars or about Chery's entry into the EV market. Thanks for watching.